would you look at that? We have passed 3,000 subscribers now. I know for a lot of channels out there, 3,000 isn't really a big deal, but for me, it definitely is. So as a way of saying thank you to all of you guys who made this possible, here is a Q&A video that a bunch of you guys have been requesting for quite a while now. You guys have submitted all kinds of different questions. They generally fall into two categories though. There's the behind the scenes kind of stuff, questions about the channel and about me personally, and there's the more sort of topic-based questions. So I'm going to cover the behind the scenes stuff first and the topical stuff later on. And also, some of the questions, they kind of cross over with each other. So if you don't see your question come up specifically in the video, it's probably because it's been combined with another one. So the answer should hopefully still be in there somewhere. And you can jump forward to the next question by clicking on the annotation here or by going to the time code that is displayed. But before we get to the first question, you might remember that a few weeks back, I mentioned a channel called MrSunday Movies that was unfairly shut down by YouTube, and that there were a bunch of us doing a Twitter campaign to try and bring him back. If you want the full story of what happened, just click here to see that section of the video where I talk about that. But there's good news, MrSunday Movies is back. Yes, he has come back and he's got a brand new channel. So if you're a fan of his from before, you can find his new channel right here or following the link in the description. So I guess our Twitter campaign didn't really work because instead of him getting his old channel back, he had to start a whole new channel all over again. And while that's certainly great for all of us because we get to see his videos, it kind of sucks for him because he has to start all over again, and he had just hit 10,000 subscribers before this happened, and now he's right back down to 0 trying to work his way up again. So that's gotta suck. So now it's up to all of us to help sort of spread the word about his new channel. And even if you're not familiar with his videos from before, check him out anyway because he really knows his stuff about comics and he's extremely funny as well. And when you do go over there, be sure to drop a comment saying that Bandit Incorporated sent you. Now just one last shout out before we begin. A quick thank you to Simon Singh, who recently created a trailer for the Batman vs Superman What It Should Be videos. Sort of like, if that story was made into an actual movie, what would the trailer look like? Well, Simon has made one, and you can check it out on his channel right here. And thank you again to you, Simon, for taking the time to make that, because I know that you spent the whole weekend working on it. So it's very much appreciated. So without any further ado, let's begin with the first question in our Q&A. Question number 1. Why don't you ever show your face? Well, mainly because I don't have a camera, or at least not a very good one. But you know, now that I've been doing this for a little while, it has sort of become kind of like the style of the channel. And I have actually found that by not having video of myself, it actually forces me to work harder on my videos because people get bored by still images a lot faster than they do from video footage. So I need to make sure that I'm saying something that's worth listening to hold people's attention. And often the use of images also leads to like funny new things that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise. So I mean, I suppose I probably will eventually show my face, but it'd make sense if I wait until like a special occasion in order to do it. So in the meantime, I just use this cat avatar to represent me. By the way, the reason that I use the cat image is because at the time when I started the channel, I just got a cat who is a cat which is always looking for attention, and whenever I'm working on my computer, she often like jumps up on the desk and she tries to like walk over the top of the keyboard, and after I've like pushed her off a couple of times, she'll like walk around behind the computer and sort of peek out from around the edge of the computer screen and just sort of stare at me. So I guess subconsciously I've always sort of associated the cat's face with me working on my YouTube videos, so it kind of seemed appropriate. And since this is a Q&A, I guess, you know, I could just talk a bit more broadly to you guys because it's supposed to be kind of like a getting to know you thing or something. So I gotta tell you, my breed of cat here is a breed called Australian Mist. That is very rare because it can only be found here in Australia, and even then, there is such a big demand for them and there's not very many breeders, but they are easily the best breed of cat you could ever get. In fact, click here to watch a video about the Australian Mist because they are an amazing breed, and if you ever want to get a cat and you're lucky enough to stumble upon a breeder, just get one. Don't think about it, just get one. You will not regret it. I wasn't even a cat person, but this cat has converted me. Question number 2. Where do you live? Well, Australia. A lot of people think I'm British because I guess I don't talk like the typical kind of Aussie that you see on the TV, mate. In fact, I don't really know anyone who talks like that in real life. I guess like any other country, you know, dialects kind of change depending on what area you live in. For example, MrSunday Movies lives in Melbourne, and he sounds like this.
It feels like Fox are pitching this latest X-Men film as the one to put the franchise back on track. Which is odd when you take into consideration how much of a good film First Class is.
Milan Jeftic 1992 is from Sydney, and he talks like this.
No matter how much vitriol and hatred and pent up just unbridled fury you might have for the man, Zack Snyder makes movies that make people talk.
Mitch from Mitches Movies, he's from Perth, and he sounds like this.
Miles and Garnkay later attends the funeral, and Miles talks to Gwen Stacy, asking him why Peter became a superhero. She explained to him because he did it because with great power becomes great responsibility, all that type of stuff.
And then over in Queensland, that's kind of where you get more like the surfer kind of dudes, which means they just kind of talk a bit slower, eh? And over in the Northern Territories, probably more the Crocodile Dundee type accent. I kind of live sort of halfway between like Queensland and Sydney. I mean, I grew up in Melbourne, I lived in Perth for a couple of years before I moved here, so I guess that's kind of why I sound like this. But where I am right now is much more country. In fact, if you watch the beginning of the movie Sanctum, the scenery that you see at the beginning there, in the movie it's supposed to be Papua New Guinea, but that was actually filmed about 5 minutes away from where I live. In fact, this mountain you're seeing right here, I've actually climbed that twice. And you can see it from my house. And interestingly, the peak of this mountain here is the first part of Australia that gets touched by sunlight each morning, which is kind of cool. Question number 3. What's up with your channel name? Bandit Incorporated. Well, I picked that name kind of as a bit of a statement about the state of the internet at this particular point in history, where because, as we all know, the technology is moving faster than the law can keep up with, so this sort of creates this type of lawless, Wild West kind of setting in which the internet operates. You know, you got like pirates over here uploading stolen movies, you got con artists over here trying to pull the latest online scams, you got dodgy corporations taking advantage of the lack of regulation to fleece innocent people, and of course you've got the hackers that are spreading viruses just for the hell of it. Yeah, the internet truly is like this Wild West of the modern age, and YouTube is at the very forefront of that, as we often see with all the copyright insanity that's going on. And in the midst of all of this craziness, you've got people like me who are just trying to carve out a little piece of this new frontier, just like the early settlers of the West did. And like those early settlers, it's a very risky business. I mean, you could be doing just fine one day, and the next day you could get cut down in a hail of bullets without any warning. Just take a look at MrSunday Movies. That happened to him just recently. So I picked the name Bandit to kind of reflect that Wild West nature of YouTube and the internet. But, you know, I do believe that just as the Wild West was eventually tamed, no doubt the internet will, over time, be tamed and will be properly regulated. Things are kind of already starting to head in that direction, and, you know, once we get there, things will be a lot more secure for people like me. But the West ain't quite dead yet, so, you know, you always got to kind of keep your wits about you, because there's always people out there ready to put a bullet in your back. As for the incorporated part, that's so that in the future, if, you know, I want to decide to branch out to cover additional areas of media as well, then it can still all be kept under the Bandit Incorporated banner. But don't worry, you know, I'm never going to stop making videos for you guys, but, you know, the name just sort of leaves the option out there to branch out into new things. Question number 4. Why did you start your YouTube channel? Well, there's a little bit of a story to this, is, you know, a lot of people who do sort of get into YouTube, they often kind of fall into it. Not saying that that's bad or anything, but it does seem to be a common thing that you hear from a lot of YouTubers. They always say that they never really intended it to be a thing, but it just kind of became a thing for them. That's not really the case with my channel, because there was and is a definite purpose behind why I started this channel and why I continue to work on it. I mean, obviously the first one is because I love talking about movies, but there is more to it than that. Well, as the story goes, you know how like when you're a teenager and like everyone's sort of hassling you to sort of map out your career pathway for the future, and you always hear people saying, you know, everyone has a talent, you just have to find out what it is. Well, I think I, like many people, didn't really figure out what my particular talent was for quite a long time, but of course I found out that it was writing. That's kind of the thing that I'm good at. A couple of years back, I don't remember how it was that I got the idea in my head, but for some reason I decided that come hell or high water, I was going to write a book. And it didn't matter how long it took, I was going to not only start it, but actually finish it as well. So I had my idea for what kind of book I wanted to write. I mapped out the story, sort of chapter by chapter, on this piece of paper that I like stuck on my wall, and I resolved that I was going to write something every day until that story was done. You know, even if I could only write like a paragraph, didn't matter, as long as I would write something each day. And even if the paragraph was terrible, I figured, you know, I'll come back and fix it later. But I'll tell you what, the first time that I sat down and started writing, first time I'd ever tried to do anything like that, I only had to write a few pages, and I just knew straight away. I just knew that I had finally found my thing, finally found what I was good at. I knew it because it was like finding the final piece of a puzzle that I've been trying to solve for a really long time, and it felt like coming home. In fact, in episode 5 of Age of Ultron, at that moment where Pepper says to Tony, it feels like coming home after a really long journey, that's actually where the line comes from. And you know, from that point on, as I was writing, the story kind of just poured out of me, and it like practically wrote itself. And it was like the best feeling ever. You know, like you feel like you finally found your place in the world. And, you know, because according to my analytics on this channel, like a big chunk of people who watch my channel are young people. And, you know, you guys or girls out there, you're probably going through a similar period where like you're finishing high school and everyone's kind of pressuring you to find where it is you want to go. My advice to you in sort of finding your talent would be take a look at your parents. I know none of us really want to because we don't want to think that we're like our parents, especially when we're teenagers. But the truth is, none of us can really fight genetics, and whatever your talent is, it's going to be in the genes. It's going to be something that runs in the family. How you use your talent is totally up to you, but what your talent is, that's going to be in the genes. You have no say over that. Like my mum actually writes kids' books, and my dad was a journalist. Yet it never really occurred to me to try my hand at writing sooner. If I had, you know, I could have saved a lot of time if I had just looked at them. I mean, I actually knew this guy who was an orphan, and just completely out of nowhere, he like became a carpenter, and he was like designing like furniture, like really beautiful furniture. He was just a natural at it. And when he finally did meet his father, well, you know what profession he was a carpenter. So it's in the genes, you can't fight it. However, you know, your talent might not be in the same exact area as your parents, but it's going to be involving the same skill set. Like if your dad's a mechanic, your thing might not be working on cars, but it will be something involving like building and repairing in that same kind of way. So my advice would be look at the stuff that your parents are good at and experiment with those until you find your thing. And when you do find your thing, you'll know it immediately. You'll know it. But anyway, getting back to the question. So I finished the book, and, you know, I paid to have it edited because my spelling is terrible. And, you know, it was all great, and I felt fantastic about it all, and it was all wonderful. And then I started to submit it to publishers, to literary agents, to anyone and everyone that was taking submissions. Like every single place in the country, just magazines, like everybody. And every single one of them without exception, every single one of them turned me down. I mean, the vast majority of them never actually responded at all. A few were nice enough to send me a letter saying why they weren't interested, even though you could just tell it was like the standard line they use for everyone. It doesn't fit into our overall strategy for publishing. Yeah, needless to say though, that really sucked. You know, that whole thing of like, you have this great story, you love writing it, you send it off and everyone's like, nah. It's pretty hurtful. And it was kind of frustrating because I knew that when the rubber met the road with my readers, like those who I did give the book to read to and like various people, I knew that people did like my stuff. But like in between me and a potential audience was this publishing industry, which are mostly like old geezers that don't really understand anything, you know, especially since I was writing for young adults. Or, you know, it's people who like wanted to be writers, but for one reason or another they weren't able to. So they just kind of gave up and took a job in publishing instead, and they're kind of bitter about it, so they then want to stop other people from succeeding because they couldn't succeed. So I thought to myself, okay, is there a way that I can circumvent this whole publishing middleman and just go directly to an audience and let the audience decide for themselves whether my stories are good or not? Yes, the internet. So I then went and did a course in web design with the goal of that I'll be able to build websites for people to sort of pay the rent while I'm still working on my writing at the same time, and so that I could build a website on which I would eventually put my stories up for people to see. The only problem was I sucked at designing websites. I mean, I could do it, but, you know, when I looked at my work compared with some of the other people's work in the class, like if I was hiring someone to build a website, I know who I would have picked, and it wouldn't have been me. So I realized pretty quickly that web design was not going to be a really good way for me to make a living while I'm working on my writing. However, as part of that course, we learned a bit about multimedia, you know, Photoshop, animation, all that kind of stuff. Primarily using Adobe Premiere Pro and Photoshop. Everything that I do is using those two programs. Some people have asked that. So I started Bandit Incorporated as a way of hopefully making a living on YouTube, since I realized I wouldn't make much money designing websites. And also something that could be used to eventually direct people to my books when I do put them online. And you know, it's kind of funny how things work out, because now that the channel here has kind of grown and changed over the last year and a half, and it's kind of become its own thing, especially with the What It Should Be videos, now I kind of don't really feel like I need to be published anymore. I mean, even though that was the whole point of why I started down this road in the first place. I mean, it would still be great, don't get me wrong, I would definitely not say no if the opportunity came along to get a book published. But the way I see it at the moment is there's like thousands and thousands of authors out there writing books that are getting printed every year, but how many people tell stories in the way that it can be done right here on YouTube? You know, in the way that I do, or in that Belated Media does with his rewrites of the Star Wars prequels. I mean, not many people are really doing that. So it's kind of like a new field for storytelling, and I actually think that's super exciting, you know, because bookstores are closing down all over the place. Like, that's sort of slowing down and closing up. It will never die out, but it's on the downward slope. Whereas what's opening up here on YouTube is kind of like a new area that hasn't been explored before. And it is starting to pick up, because I know a couple of you guys are actually working on your own versions of What It Should Be videos right now. And I think that's fantastic. And I would say go for it, because, you know, maybe, just maybe, we could be seeing the beginning of kind of like a new trend here. Something that we can all be a part of. Or we could all get shut down for copyright tomorrow. Like, you know, it's the Wild West. Anything can happen. But in all seriousness, like, as much as I do complain about the copyright issues here on YouTube, at the same time, YouTube has been able to do something for me that the more traditional routes have not been able to do, which is it's allowed me to sort of display my work directly to you guys instead of having to go through like literary agents and publishing houses. And, you know, if the trade-off is having to deal with a bit of nonsense about copyright from time to time, I think that's a fair trade. So at the end of the day, I'm always going to be grateful for YouTube for that reason. So basically, why did I create my YouTube channel? Well, it was born out of my failure to be a writer and my failure to be a web designer. Those two failures kind of came together to form Bandit Incorporated, which will probably also fail. I hope not, but who knows. Question number 5. What YouTubers would you like to work with the most? Well, not counting the YouTubers that I have already worked with or that I am going to work with in the near future, I would say that the top guys I would love to work with, in no specific order, would be Belated Media, because like I said before, at the moment he and I are similar in the sense that we're both doing like fan fiction videos, and we're kind of the only people who do them at the moment. And in case you haven't seen any of his work, he's best known for his What If Star Wars Episode 1 was good, What If Star Wars Episode 2 was good, and we're still waiting for his What If Episode 3 was good. That's going to be a tough one, because, you know, he has to wrap everything up, and Anakin still has to turn to the dark side, and you can kind of see the seeds of Anakin's turn that he's planted in the other two videos. So I'm kind of keen to see how he's going to resolve all that. But Belated Media has said that he is going to do What If It Were Good videos in the future. Like, he's going to do like maybe Indiana Jones 4, what if that was good, or SpiderMan 3. So, you know, I would love to be able to work with him sometime in the future. And because to me, he's kind of like the pioneer of this certain type of fan fiction here on YouTube, because he sort of started it. That's actually why I made him the president in episode 6 of Age of Ultron. It's my little salute to him. In fact, I actually emailed him some time ago and I offered to write one of his scripts for him. And I didn't actually expect to hear back from him because he's such a huge channel. I figured he probably gets like, you know, dozens upon dozens of emails every week. But he actually did answer, which was really amazing. And he said no, but very politely though. And, you know, because I mentioned my What It Should Be videos in the email, but I said, you know, they're kind of different to yours because you're rewriting movies that already come out while I'm writing them before they come out. So we kind of cover different areas. But he was really encouraging about that. And he said, you know, that sounds really cool. Keep it up. Keep working at it. And yeah, he just seems like a super nice guy. And if you're watching this, Belated Media, my offer still stands. Any script that you want written for any movie that you want to do a What If It Was Good video on, just say the word and I will happily write it for you. Another YouTuber that I would absolutely love to work with is the Nostalgia Critic. Why? Well, because he's the Nostalgia Critic. I mean, he's the king of kings. He's, well, king of review kings anyway. And, you know, just in his last video that he made, he said that his website is actually doing talent pickups until the end of May. So I actually sent across a couple of my videos and we'll see what happens. Probably nothing. But, you know, as the saying goes, you can't win if you're not at the table. So Nostalgia Critic, I would also love to work with. So those are kind of the behind the scenes question. Let's get stuck into some of the more topical questions. Question 6. If you could pick 5 movie characters to be in a zombie apocalypse with, who would they be? Interesting question. It's kind of like a funny twist on which 5 historical figures would you have for dinner. This is which 5 fictional characters would you have in a zombie apocalypse. So it's... it's a good question. So these would be my choices for a zombie survival team. My first fictional character would be Paul Blart Mall Cop. A very strange choice, I know, but the reason I would have him is because that way when the zombie outbreak first sort of hits and we all have to run from like the mob of zombies that's chasing us, he would be the first one to get caught. And since he's like a big dude, the zombies would have plenty to feed on, which would keep them occupied long enough for the rest of us to escape. And since it's Paul Blart, nobody would really care if he died. So he would be my first choice just as like human bait to keep the zombie occupied while the rest of us get away. Secondly, I think in every zombie apocalypse movie, you need to have someone with usable skills. Like maybe they could help to build stuff, like to repair a car so you can use it to escape with, or, you know, other stuff that would be helpful. So my second choice would be MacGyver, because that guy can do anything. He could find an old boot, use it as a can opener. It would be very valuable in a zombie apocalypse. Thirdly, we would need someone who is not only tough enough to fight the zombies, but would also know stuff about maybe survival skills and hunting that can help to sort of keep us fed. And since we would have to repopulate after the apocalypse, it would be good if she was also a female. So I would go with Katniss Everdeen, because she can hunt rabbits for us to eat, and she can become the mother of my children. Not MacGyver's, mine. Fourthly, again, we'd need another female to sort of pair up with MacGyver so we can repopulate. But again, it would still need to be someone who has useful skills. And, you know, while Katniss is sort of good with a bow and an arrow, that's not really going to be helpful in fighting zombies. So we need someone who's an expert in weaponry, but specifically weaponry that is best suited for taking out zombies. And since I've read the Zombie Survival Guide, written by the same guy that wrote World War Z, I can tell you guns and chainsaws are not a good choice. Because, you know, despite them being popular in movies, they're not a good choice because they create a lot of noise and that always attracts more zombies, so it gets you into trouble really quickly. So the best weapon to fight zombies is something that's silent, something that won't jam, won't break down, won't run out of gas, and doesn't need to be reloaded. The perfect weapon is the katana. So my fourth choice would be Uma Thurman's character from Kill Bill, because she could teach the rest of us how to use the katana, and she could be MacGyver's girlfriend, so that everything's all nicely squared off. But it's 5 people, so there's still one choice left, and that's a problem, because like if we bring in another guy, then there's not enough girls to go around, and if we bring in another girl, then me and MacGyver end up fighting over who gets her, and since he's MacGyver, he'll probably win. So for the 5th choice, I would pick Data. Because he's obviously not going to need a chick, and plus, since he's a robot, the zombies wouldn't pay much attention to him. So if you ever needed to like pick up supplies in an area that's swarming with zombies, you could just send Data in there. Yeah, he could just walk in, pick it up, walk right out with no problem. Plus, Data doesn't need to sleep, so he can stand guard during the night while the rest of us are asleep. You know, he's super strong, he's super fast, he's super intelligent, and if he needs to be repaired, MacGyver can fix him up. Also, because Data himself is kind of innocent like a child, then his presence there would also sort of help to keep everyone's moral compass pointing in the right direction during all that zombie apocalypse. So that at the end of the day, we don't lose what it is that makes us human. So that would be the 5 fictional characters I would choose to survive a zombie apocalypse. Question number 7. Batman versus Spider-Man. Who would win? Spider-Man. For the same reason that I think Superman should beat Batman, because when you got someone with superpowers against someone without superpowers, 99 times out of 100 the guy with the superpowers is going to win. I mean, sure, there is that 1 in 100 chance, but those aren't very good odds. I mean, I would be cheering for Batman to win, because he's DC, but if I were to bet money, I would have to bet on Spider-Man every time out of the gate. You know, you don't bring a knife to a gunfight. It doesn't matter how sharp that knife might be, or how sharp Batman's skills might be, you don't bring a knife to a gunfight. And Spider-Man is a gunfighter because he has superpowers. Question 8. Favorite hero and villain from the DCU? Obviously Superman is my favorite. Favorite villain would be Ra's al Ghul. Superman for obvious reasons, but Ra's al Ghul, I like him because he's kind of like what Moriarty was to Sherlock Holmes. You know, like Moriarty was created to be a villain who was better than Sherlock in every single way that makes Sherlock special. And that's why he was brought in as the villain that was supposed to kill off Sherlock, and then they brought him back to life because because, the writer was broke, he needed money, blah, blah, blah. But Ra's al Ghul is like that for Batman. He's better than Batman in all of the ways that make Batman special, but he's also got the same mission that Batman does, but he has a very different way of going about it. Batman's view of crime is kind of narrow-minded. He's like, let's just stop crime. Just stop it, eradicate it. But Ra's al Ghul is more like, well, you can stop a crime, but unless you do something to change the society that allows crime to exist in the first place, then you're not really changing anything. So Ra's al Ghul looks at things from more a planetary perspective, and in a way you gotta kind of agree with him. He's right on a few things. So I think he's a really interesting villain, and, Tower of Babel, who was it that took out all of the Justice League? It wasn't Batman, it was Ra's al Ghul. I mean, sure, he was using Batman's plans, but he actually took those plans and tweaked them, improving them, making them better and more effective, adding more weight to the claim that Ra's al Ghul is actually better than Batman. Yeah, and besides, Ra's al Ghul has beaten up Batman a number of times. So yeah, I think he's a really great villain. Question 9. What do you think of the new Batsuit? Okay, I like it. I mean, I was never really worried about the Batsuit or any of the costumes for this next movie, because one thing about Zack Snyder is his movies always look really great. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Even people who hated Man of Steel don't deny that it looked fantastic. So for me, the Batsuit was never really a concern. I mean, the only thing that I really don't like about the Batsuit is the fact that Ben Affleck is in it. I mean, everything looks great except for that chin, because you can tell that it's Ben Affleck. You could tell from his chin that that's him. Yeah, I was hoping for a Batsuit that would hide him enough that it would make you forget that Ben Affleck was inside it, but no, there it is, you can tell. Maybe they could have him like grow stubble on his chin, so it will kind of hide that as well, so that way, at least when he's in the suit, we don't have to see any part of Ben Affleck at all. Wouldn't that be great if we didn't have to see Ben Affleck at all? That would be fantastic. I mean, I really have more to say about the person inside the suit than the suit itself. I'm sorry to open up this can of worms again, but it's Ben Affleck in the Batsuit. We have to talk about it again. We can't not talk about it. But look, I'm sure Ben Affleck's going to do an okay job as Batman, just like he does an okay job in every other acting role that he's ever been in. And I'm sure that when this movie comes out, people will try to say that he was way better than he actually was because they want to convince themselves that it's great. People have already been doing that. People have been trying to say that Daredevil was a good movie because they want to believe that this is a good casting choice, when deep down I think most of them are disappointed just as the rest of us are. I mean, I would have preferred like Josh Brolin. Josh Brolin would have been my first choice though. And I know people keep saying the hey, no one thought Heath Ledger would be good thing, and oh man, I'm so sick of hearing that. And like, look, as Jeremy Jans explained it,
But I feel like all the casting in this movie is Zack Snyder or somebody trying to go for long shots, It's like, oh yeah, just like Ledger's Joker, and no one had faith in that, and then he killed it. We're gonna do that with every main character in this movie, which you can usually do that with one. If you have everyone else that people have faith in, that one oddball where you're like, is that gonna work? And then the movie does, and that person does kill it, and you're like, ah, cool, it worked. But everybody, that's just risky.
look, I think at the end of the day, what I keep coming back to is this. Maybe Ben Affleck will be fine as like a new version of Batman. Maybe Jesse Eisenberg will be fine as a new version of Lex. Maybe Gal Gadot will be fine as a new version of Wonder Woman. Okay, maybe. But why couldn't we have just gotten the version that we all wanted to see? People wanted to see Bryan Cranston as Lex. People wanted to see Brolin or Urban or John Hamm as Batman. Nobody wanted to see this. Yet none of these names were thrown around by the fans to play any of these parts. We are still waiting to get a version of Lex Luthor played the way that he should be played from the comics. We had bumbling Gene Hackman doing his thing. We have Kevin Spacey doing whatever that was. But, we've never really seen a big screen Lex like he is in the comics. On the small screen we kind of have, with Smallville and like the animated movies, but never on the big screen. And now it looks like we're just going to be skipping over it completely to a version that has nothing to do with anything. See now, like, if this was 10 years in the future and we've already seen all of the versions of the characters that we wanted to see played like they should be from the comics, and people are kind of bored with that now, then would be a good time to make these kind of choices, to shake things up and make things new to get people interested again. But not now. They're reinventing the characters without us ever having seen the original design. And at the end of the day, that's really what saps my enthusiasm for this movie. And I know a lot of you guys feel the same way. You know what it's like? It's like if you showed up on your wedding day and the priest says to you, yeah, I know you had your heart set on marrying this certain girl, but we've decided to switch it up a bit, to try something different. So we've gotten a different girl for you to marry. And you'd be like, I'm sure this new girl is nice, but I want the girl that I wanted in the first place, not this new girl. Oh, don't be so close-minded. Don't prejudge. You should really wait until after you're married, and then you should decide whether or not she's right for you. Gotta give her the benefit of the doubt. I don't want this new version. Well, too bad, because you have to marry her whether you like to or not, and there's nothing you could do about it. Well, that is basically what's happening here. Warner Brothers is forcing us to marry someone that we don't want to marry. And some people in that situation will try to convince themselves that they're happy with their new wife. But I can't do that. You can dress the new wife up in the prettiest wedding dress ever. It doesn't make me want the person that's inside it. This Batsuit is like that wedding dress. And I do not want to be married to Ben Affleck. So, yeah, I think the Batsuit looks good. So that's it for the Q&A video. I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question. I tried to answer as many as I could. But I hope through this you've been able to maybe get to know me a little bit better. And I want to thank you guys so much for your support. And for us hitting this target of 3,000 subscribers, it's incredible. And I look forward to being able to upload lots of future videos for you guys that hopefully you like. And until then, I will see you next time.